Hi, this is going to be a channel update just to let you know what plans I have for the channel, because lately I have been producing some videos that were not that common when it comes to my schedule. Maybe some of you have already seen my Abraham's method video where I talk about player character emulation. If you haven't and you enjoy solo tabletop role playing games, I highly recommend that you check out that video. I'm going to put the link in the description below. And I've also been producing session reports of a game, a white box Dungeons and Dragons game known as From the Ashes, that I have been playing. So I've been putting up my uploading my session reports. So I think those videos make excellent fillers. They are still quite valuable in terms of instructional purpose and entertainment purpose as well. But I also think that they are good in terms of filling the gaps between my review videos and other type of videos, because they are relatively simple to make, and they also further explain the Abraham's method. When it comes to my reviews, I've been expecting a few things that should arrive in the mail. They should have arrived already, but the postal service has been quite slow lately. Maybe due to the whole virus madness. So I hope I will get those items soon to produce those reviews. And in the meantime, my next review is going to feature a very sophisticated, very awesome role-playing game. It's a 604 pages long rulebook. I want to keep it a bit like a surprise, but it's a game that feels as if they combined World of Darkness with some other storytelling heavy systems. That is, even World of Darkness is already quite focused on storytelling, but this role-playing game puts great emphasis on character development and the way that the character affects the world. It's quite focused on the characters. They are extremely powerful. So I hope I will get it ready perhaps in a couple of weeks. It was a somewhat difficult review. It's a somewhat difficult review to make, because it's, like I told you, it's quite sophisticated. There are many great things about that role-playing game, so I really want to produce a worthy review. I'm going to attempt it, to try it. And in the meantime, I wanted to share with you a funny story today, rather tonight. I think that at first I thought it would be like a horror RPG story, but there are so many funny elements about it, and there are only just a few things that you could consider like horror worthy. It's mostly funny. So I hope you will enjoy this tale, this story of the Super Saiyan Druid. Yes, it was back like 25 years ago, 22 years ago. It was when in my early teenage years. I was still learning how to be a game master, or rather a dungeon master. Back then I played a lot of advanced Dungeons and Dragons. So we were about to start this AD&D campaign, and I had a player that was quite different from the others. I'm going to put things into context to better understand how things happened. First, because I was a rookie game master, or just starting to get my feet wet on the world of role-playing games, there were many things that I could have handled much better. There are probably going to be many parts in this story, and you, those of you that are game masters, are going to be thinking, oh, you should have done this or that. And I totally agree, there are many things that have been handled better on my part. I needed more experience, more solid theory and practice of role-playing games. And I think it would have been great if some of the role-playing games that we see nowadays, if only they had been present back then, maybe I could have used those role-playing games instead of AD&D. But it also had to do with the experience that we wanted to enjoy. The other thing that will serve to put into context has a lot to do with the protagonist of this story. This player, let's call him Al. So Al was someone that had a lot of well, not a lot, but very specific geek or nerd related hobbies. He liked a lot of geeky things, but he was in a state of conflict because at the same time he also wanted to be a part of the cool kids, in school and such. And for those that haven't lived in Mexico, in general, to be a cool kid, you have to drink a lot. It also depends on the time and place, but back then you needed to drink. Perhaps you need to smoke or certain things and take certain substances. You also had to be a bit on the, let's say, on the gangsta side of things, but on the side of Mexico, many things related to the cartels, corruption. If you weren't into that dangerous lifestyle, at least when it comes to Jesuit or Catholic schools, you were like an outcast, like a social reject. So Al was constantly looking for the approval of what of those that he considered the cool kids. So he also had more rep or a higher reputation or street cred or whatever you want to call it if you had already had sex from a very early age. So Al was very interested in all of those things. Not so bad as others, but he was still trying to fit in with those with certain groups. And we're talking about private schools. Don't think that this is just like something like a ghetto thing or something. So he was a bit torn because he had these nerdy hobbies, and at the same time he wanted to keep those hobbies a secret from the people that he wanted to hang out with. And he also was hanging out with us, with like the nerds or the geeks. So it was quite the situation for him. And among all of those nerdy things that he liked, there was Dragon Ball Z. Many of you know what Dragon Ball is, of course, and back then it was really popular in Mexico. Nowadays it's decently popular, but there are a lot of other things that have come out recently, like Attack on Titan and My Hero Academia, all of that. But when it comes to anime, Dragon Ball Z was the king back then. Maybe it only had a few rivals like Saint Seiya or Knights of the Zodiac, and Captain Tsubasa, or as it is known in Mexico, Super Campeones. And so Al wanted to indulge his pleasure that he experienced for the hobby of Dragon Ball Z stuff, all things related to Dragon Ball Z, be it video games or board games, anything. But he wanted to keep that a secret, so he didn't have that way to express himself, he express his, let's say, his love for Dragon Ball Z. So he always had to keep it hidden from those cool kids. But when he played with us, he always wanted to find some way of introducing Dragon Ball Z elements everywhere. So we were going to start this Advanced Dungeons and Dragons campaign, and he wanted to play as a character that was basically Goku, the main character. So he started out with a fighter wizard, an elf fighter wizard, just because he wanted to be very strong in close quarters combat, but at the same time he wanted to do those crazy energy attacks like the Kamehameha and all of those. But well, his playing style was quite clumsy because of that. As many of you know, a fighter wizard isn't going to be as capable as a fighter when it comes to long range, and at the lower levels he's going to be decent when it comes to using spells, but that's it. But he wanted to be like the best at everything. So he wanted to fight up close and shoot spells from afar like a pro, but he usually ended up getting killed. He played quite recklessly. Mm, that's where I could have done something better. If if only I had a bit more experience back then or more knowledge, I could have homebrewed a sort of character class that was somewhat balanced for what he wanted. It's simply impossible to introduce Goku as a character, or Goku rather, in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. He's too powerful. He's on the level of many consider him to be at the level of Superman. Although I don't want to get into those discussions that who's stronger, Superman or Goku. But it was very difficult to introduce a character like that. But maybe I could have designed some sort of monk that used spells, because back then I didn't have expansions and splat books and all of that allows you to use those different character classes. In fact, I think that the monk had very little when it comes to attention or treatment during the AD&D era. I think the monk reached its peak when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition, 3.5, and later on. So there were many things that I could have done. And like I told you, I wish that there were some role-playing games that we have today. Many of those anime-focused role-playing games. There are many in recent times. They could maybe, if I just had those games back then, maybe I could have proposed a separate campaign so that Al could have played as Goku or a character quite similar to the Dragon Ball Z protagonist in those campaigns. So I did what I could, and I proposed that he could create perhaps a cleric type of character, because clerics are usually very strong in close quarters combat, but at the same time they have spell potential when it comes to offensive capabilities. So he took a look at the cleric, but it wasn't really in tune with the whole clerical thing. So he decided to create a druid. I don't know exactly what he loved about the druids. I think it was because I'm not exactly sure, but I'm pretty sure, but almost certain that he watched that movie, that horror film Warlock. I think that's it. And in Warlock there are druids. There was this guy that used the baseball as a sort of druid spell, so I think he was quite into druids. Yes, that must have been it. And so he decided to create a druid, but every time there was a fight, he would go into basically Super Saiyan mode. His hair would turn completely blonde. His character normally had like dark brown hair, and his hair would go completely blonde, and his eyes would turn into like greenish or aqua or cyan color like Goku, and he was living his dream of being a Dragon Ball Z character in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. But it was the funny thing is that it had a balance of a bit of cringe, but at the same time, because of the things that he did, but at the same time he did some pretty amazing things for the party. So I think that made it very easy to tolerate those Dragon Ball elements within what should have been a classic AD&D experience, because we all wanted those. We wanted more like Lord of the Rings with high magic in Dungeons and Dragons style, rather than Dragon Ball mixed with medieval fantasy. So every fight he will go into this high-pitched voice, like, those of you that have seen Dragon Ball in Japanese know that Goku has this really high-pitched and at the same time choky voice, like like very difficult to emulate that voice. So every time there was this fight, he would be like, like doing those noises, and he says, "Oh, now my hair goes blonde and my eyes turn green, or that color, that kind of like aqua or cyan," and he would start to fight. But that was not the worst thing. The thing is that he wanted to fight like Goku so much that he usually ended up dropping his weapons in order to fight unarmed. And unless you are a very specialized type of character in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, you're going to get yourself killed if you start to start fighting with ogres and dragons. And there was one time that he actually got into a fist fight with an ogre with predictable results. But he felt quite encouraged by this because one time I think he managed to knock out two orcs, because in AD&D, for those that haven't played AD&D, you make your roll and there is a small percentage to knock out your opponent. And in a single combat, he actually got quite lucky and managed to knock out two orcs and pretty much saved the day back in that combat. So he got really excited and he wanted to keep on fighting unarmed. I think he also got encouraged by the fact that he was training boxing in real life, so he wanted to show off his knowledge of boxing. So every chance he got, he dropped his weapons and he always went unarmed. One time he even again saved the group. Like I told you, it's very funny because he was doing all of those ridiculous things, but at the same time he was helping the party. They were fighting a lot of goblins and he managed to provoke many goblins, like a big chunk of the force, and started running towards a deeper part in the woods, and the goblins followed him, and then he turns around and drops his weapons and he's like, now I got you where I want. And he started to fight unarmed. Of course the goblins left him unconscious. The goblins thought it was quite funny that he dropped his weapons and wanted to fight them, so they started like doing a conga line over his body while he was knocked out. And then the rest of the party arrived and managed to kill the goblins, but he saved the day because he divided all of that force, separated all of those goblins from the rest of the party. So yeah, there were many moments in which he saved the party, and he was constantly trying to modify Druid spells so that it felt more like Dragon Ball. He used the Shillelagh spell. You remember the spell that you turn your quarterstaff into this sort of like very powerful, like a cudgel sort of weapon, and he said he was like Goku's staff, the one that elongates, you know. And other times he was using something like entangle, you know, when you try to ensnare enemies with vines and plants around, and he would say something like Kamehameha, you know, like Goku. So it was hilarious, but at the same time I was dissatisfied that I wasn't having that classic Advanced Dungeons and Dragons experience. Also, because druids didn't have too much, not a good selection of ranged weapons. They only had like darts and using a sling with stones or bullets or whatever. Every time he used a ranged attack, he also said something like big ball or kamehameha, something like that. He only started to use weapons when the character Trunks was introduced to the anime, because Trunks wields a sword and suddenly swords are cool now because he felt like Trunks, so he started to use his scimitar like he should have done. In a way, I think it's admirable that he role played the type of character that he wanted, even if it was disadvantageous for him, and you could say for the entire group at times. But like I told you, he made up, or rather he compensated that by saving the group at the same time. There was this, what I would consider his moment of great glory, where the party was fighting against, it was a very young red dragon, and they were supposed to fight him inside of a cavern, but they had an idea. They set up a trap with boulders just outside of the dragon's lair, and so the idea was to steal some treasure from the dragon, run outside with all of that treasure, and the dragon would be chasing them and activating the trap just as the dragon would go across the cavern's exit. Though several boulders would fall up over the dragon, damaging the dragon and potentially pinning it to the ground. But the dragon was almost unaffected. It did get a bit wounded, but the effect of the trap did not go as desired. So now they had to fight this red dragon outside of the dungeon, and anyone who has fought against a red dragon. They know that they are quite vicious and sometimes they can get quite tactical. So basically, the dragon was flying all around and breathing fire over the player characters. They had to use all of the projectile weapons that they had accumulated, all of those magical arrows and darts and crossbow bolts. They were using them against the dragon. They even armed non-player characters around, like the town's guard and um, anyone basically that was able to fight. They started to use all the magical projectiles, and they even convinced some of the townspeople to use their own stock of magical projectiles. That there's a dragon, it's going to destroy the town, and so it was quite a chaotic battle. And here is where Al managed to do something quite remarkable. During his adventures, he had obtained a magic carpet, and he immediately thought that it looked like Goku's the cloud that Goku rides on. That like a cloud, like the Monkey King. So he said that carpet was his cloud, just like in Dragon Ball Z, and he immediately got on top of his carpet and went to fight the dragon in the sky. Everyone else was on the floor, on the ground, attacking the dragon with missile weapons. I think that it would have been smarter if he had told the fighter to get on the magic carpet with him or instead of him, but he was quite impulsive. He wanted to be like Goku, flying and fighting in the air, so he basically went up there. I think he had those sort of teleport behind you type of moment, and he started to fight with the dragon in close quarters. I think he got really lucky. The dragon kept missing his attacks, and he actually scored really well with his hits. He actually got a critical hit, so the dragon was quite wounded, and he even realized that the dragon was about to kill him or knock him out, so he wanted to be on a lower level because he was up there in his flying carpet, and if he got unconscious up there, nobody would be able to reach him. So he started to fly as fast as possible downwards, but the dragon got him with the dragon breath, and he ended up knocked out. He didn't die miraculously, and the party actually managed to kill the red dragon. So he was severely wounded. Of course, we were using that rule that if you get to 0 hit points, you start to bleed out, but there's still a chance to save you. So they managed to take him and heal him. And so it was quite his crowning moment, his moment of glory, when he fought the dragon in the sky on that magic carpet. After that, the campaign ended somewhat abruptly due to several factors. It was around the time of what would be the Christian panic in Mexico, where they said everything related to Dungeons and Dragons was satanic and such. So there were several factors that made the campaign, it stopped the campaign short. But there was also the fact that the party wandered into the lair of a Hydra, and I can't believe that they were not knowledgeable in mythology, that is the players, but I also managed to place several clues so that they understood that the Hydra regenerates its heads, and they needed to use fire to burn the stumps, but not a single member of the party thought about that, and almost everyone died. He managed to, and the Druid, the Super Saiyan Druid, actually managed to escape, to get away from that battle. It was pretty interesting that he actually got some common sense to. I was actually fearing or afraid that he was going to engage the Hydra unarmed. Although at that moment, like I told you, he was thinking that swords were pretty cool because Trunks, the character, was using a sword. So after that, the campaign ended without a conclusion. There's also a bit of a sad ending when it comes to Al, because later on he decided that Advanced Dungeons and Dragons was not cool anymore. He was the sort of person, like I told you, that was constantly looking for the approval of others and certain groups. He started to be how would you say, very hostile. He acted very hostile in general. For example, if you were to try to get him into Lord of the Rings, you would. I even lent him my books of the Lord of the Rings so that he would read them, and Dragonlance books, and he would like look down on you like, why are you trying to get me into those things and stuff like that. And when the Lord of the Rings movies later came out, suddenly he was a huge fan of the Lord of the Rings, but he was constantly looking for that approval. I think that if the Lord of the Rings didn't become popular because of the films, he would have rejected them. It was just because some of the people that he was hanging out with, they thought that the Lord of the Rings was cool because of the movies. So he started to reject everyone that was like a geek or a nerd. He started to look down on you as if you were inferior. Started to get into some really nasty company. He started to hang out with some really evil people, and I think that to a certain degree he became evil as well. So last I heard from him, he was actually out of his group of cool guys, and he was looking. It was like this happened like 15 years ago, more or less, 15 or 10, and he was looking for people to once again play tabletop games and all of that, but it was too late. He had already acted so hostile, such a bad person towards all of us, so nobody wanted to have any contact with him anymore. So that's the story of the Super Saiyan Druid. Like I told you, there are some tragic aspects to it, but at the same time, I still remember all of those moments, and sometimes I chuckle a bit at the absurdity of it all. I hope you found it entertaining or interesting. And that's about it. Well, thanks for watching this update video. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. And thank you so much to those that have been supporting the channel by sending Right for RPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and I hope you will watch my upcoming review. I would like to bring it out next week, if not in a couple of weeks or so. And I hope you will also keep enjoying my session reports of Abraham's method. Once again, thank you, and see you later.